Hello everyone, and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a yoga teacher. I teach meditation, an ordained minister, and a certified Kilobi inquiries facilitator. So if you're interested in esoteric spirituality, in embodiment, enlightenment, awakening, anything along those lines, then you're in the right place. So please subscribe if you're interested in those topics. And if you get something from this video, I would love it if you would give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. And if you'd like to support the work I do beyond that, please check out the links for my Patreon page. You can also just leave me a one-time tip if you like. So these talks, this teaching, the online version of it anyway, is completely supported by viewers and people like you supporting this work. Otherwise, I simply wouldn't have the time and resources to make these videos as humble as they are. So thank you. Okay, so today I'd like to discuss something that can be truly transformative in your relationships and in your spirituality in general. This is something that is a practice that you can use and begin applying immediately. And again, I have found it extremely powerful for myself in my own life. And I'm hoping that you will find it equally as powerful. So what are we here to discuss today? Well, it's something called emotional honesty. And it is a simple concept. And I think once you get the hang of it, it's something that you'll be able to practice fairly easily and effectively, but it may take you a minute to get used to doing this practice. But as I said, even if you aren't interested in spirituality or enlightenment or anything like this, this can be a truly transformative practice, and it can transform your relationships and how you relate with others. So, what is emotional honesty? Well, emotional honesty is putting things in terms of how you feel. And as human beings, how we feel is actually what drives behavior. And this is what, as I understand it, what I'm aware of, the scientific research basically backs this up. We might like to believe that we're very logical beings, that we are motivated by reason primarily, but it seems like the evidence is contrary to that, that we are motivated primarily by how we feel about things. So you may think that when you shop for something, you look at all the specs and look at the price and make comparisons, and you simply make a decision based primarily or solely on logic. And I'm not saying this never happens, of course. There may be individuals who are more driven by logic, and there might be certain areas in your life, decisions that you make that are driven by that. But in large part, we as human beings aren't driven by logic, by rationality. You might find yourself buying a device, a computer, clothes, making relationship decisions, really pretty much just by how you feel about them. What we've found with human brains and human beings is something called confabulation, where our mind will often, after the fact, rationalize how we feel in our decisions. So again, you might be right now thinking, well, you're not describing me. Everything I do is rational and makes sense. But oddly, the way our brains are wired, we can make sense of something after the fact, for lack of a better way of putting it. So we will make up our mind essentially and then fill in all the rational reasons afterward. And none of this is conscious, of course. So please don't think that, again, if you're hearing this, you're likely to say, well, I don't do that. But it's not something we do on a conscious level. So it's something that happens below our conscious awareness. And so when you say shop for a computer, you might be someone who likes Apple, and you will rationalize why you like it. But if we were to really look at things, we might find that your decision actually isn't very logical. It actually doesn't make much sense. And your decision is based, again, largely on how you feel about Apple, how you feel about the product or products that you're purchasing. So if you're following along so far, you're understanding that how we feel drives us as human beings. It really motivates us and dictates what sorts of decisions we make. So emotions are very important to us as human beings. But what we tend to do, again, because of confabulation and other things in terms of our mind, the way our mind is structured, is we're very often trying to believe that somehow the way we perceive the world and how we feel about things is in essence like an absolute truth. So for instance, if someone makes us feel little or ashamed or guilty, somehow something they say, something they do makes us feel ashamed, makes us feel guilty, makes us feel belittled, we will say something like, you are belittling me, or you're making me feel ashamed, or you're trying to make me feel guilty. These are things that we might say in this instance. And the truth is that we can't know that any of those statements are really absolutely true. It just really is not possible for us. So let's look at these examples. You're making me feel guilty. Well, the truth is, the ultimate truth is, no one can really make us feel anything. They may play a part in how we feel, but we just don't have that much control and influence as human beings. We don't have the ability to one-to-one make someone else feel something. And the way I could prove this is I could say certain things that made you feel guilty or ashamed or embarrassed, and I could do the same exact thing to someone else and they wouldn't feel ashamed or guilty or embarrassed. So if it were really me making you feel a certain way, then there would be sort of a direct causality there, that I could always make somebody feel guilty or ashamed, right? If that were a quality that I possess the ability to simply make people feel a certain way, then that would be there. So if we're interested in truth, then in a sense, you are making me feel guilty, you are making me feel ashamed, you are making me feel whatever. It isn't really a completely true statement. In a sense, we have to be wired in a certain way. The circumstance has to be correct. And the other person, of course, they play a role, but maybe not as much of a role as we like to believe if we are feeling attacked or vulnerable with someone's statements. So what we'd like to do is get closer to the truth. And the truth is, we could say in that instance, when you say this, it makes me feel guilty, or it makes me feel ashamed, or it makes me feel bad. So you may feel that this is a small and insignificant point, but I actually think it's huge. And it's a way, again, of really coming to truth, to speak truth. When you say X, it makes me feel Y, right? There really is no arguing with that point, right? Whereas if I say something like, you're making me feel bad, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're belittling me, you're shaming me, you're trying to make me feel guilty. We don't know those statements are true. Again, we don't know other people's mind as much as we may love to believe that we do. And I know that we all love that. We all love to think that we can read into other people's intentions, and we know when they are triggered or not triggered. We know when they are trying to hurt us versus not. We may be right most of the time. We may even happen to be right all the time, but there's no guarantee that we will always be correct. And I find that generally when it comes to relating with people, it's better to take people at their word. It is better to trust people, even if they aren't being completely honest with us. It just in general is better to try and take their word for it rather than trying to be clever and call them out. Because the truth is, we may believe that we're always right about people's intentions, but what proof do we really have? Do we then, after accusing someone of trying to gaslight us or trigger us or make us feel bad, do we at some point get a readout of their emotional intent and so we can verify? There really isn't a way for us to verify. And the way our mind works, our default is that we tend to just self-verify. We tend to just reinforce our own beliefs already. We are very resistant to receiving information that's going to contradict what we already believe to be true. So this is a really important point for us to understand. Again, it really doesn't matter who you are. You need to know that as a human being, you are susceptible to this, and you want to be aware of that. That when you go around accusing people of doing things, you really don't know that that's the truth or that's the case. And sometimes it can be quite embarrassing as we do spiritual work. We may get to a point where we wake up or we let go of a certain conditioning or program that we have, and we realize that the things we've been accusing others of actually really doesn't hold much weight or much truth. That people weren't as malicious as we believe they were. They weren't as hurtful as we believe they were. They weren't as selfish as we believe they were. And this can be a tough realization, because we might realize that for many years or much of our life that we've been accusing people of things that maybe really didn't hold much weight, wasn't really true. So again, an emotionally honest statement is saying something like, when you don't call me back, it makes me feel unloved. Now again, there is no arguing with that statement. It is a factually true statement, because all you're saying is that when you do this, it makes me feel this way. Now again, this is opposed to saying, you don't love me, you never call me back. Hopefully you see the difference. It's that former statement, you don't love me. Why? Because you don't call me back. That's what we often do in relating with others. We just accuse others of certain things. We assume we know certain things. Again, it is very problematic from a awake perspective, an enlightened perspective, to say that calling people back equals love. And that's just an example. I hope you all understand the way that I teach and talk. It could be anything. You don't love me, you didn't lend me money. You don't love me, you're not letting me live with you. You don't love me, you never cook dinner. You don't love me, you don't listen to what I say, whatever it might be. This is opposed to saying something like, when you don't listen to what I say, I don't feel loved, or it makes me feel unloved. Okay? Again, there really isn't arguing with that statement. Now, the other person might come back and say, well, I always listen to what you say, or I do listen to what you say. That's a different discussion or debate that you need to have. Again, my inclination, even if you highly suspect that that's not true, even if you have examples of where the person is not listening to you, and again, you might actually point that out, say, well, in this instance, I feel, again, it's very good to say I feel, or I think that you weren't listening to me because I said XYZ and, it didn't happen. You didn't follow through, whatever it might be, whatever the evidence might be. And again, I'll remind all of you, I'm sharing this with you because these are things that I've learned that have helped me find lasting peace and joy. This is not about being some kind of perfect person or being the perfect partner or always being right, anything like that. This is really just tools and really just tools that you can use in your relating, in your life, to help you experience more peace and joy. And part of that comes from better relating with others, doesn't it? Now, you might think that other people won't recognize or notice this change. You might think that this is just like semantics. Like, what does it matter if I say, accuse someone of not loving me versus saying, when you do this, I don't feel loved. But I think you might be surprised at how attuned people are to this and how different it feels on the receiving end. So when we accuse someone of bad behavior or of lying, right? You don't love me. How do I know you don't love me? Because you don't call me back right away. That's how I know. If you love me, you would call me back right away. Again, this is not a factual statement. There are people who love one another who don't call one another back. There are people who love one another who maybe don't take out the trash when they're told to do so. Love is not something that we can quantify in that way. And yet as human beings, we so often try to do that in our relationships. And again, this is because of our emotional needs. I may need you to take out the trash in order to feel loved for whatever reason. That might just set me off. Again, just because of my personal upbringing and wiring, that might just be something that really makes me feel loved. Again, you can bring this into your emotional honesty. You can say, when you take out the trash, it really makes me feel loved. And you'd be surprised at how much, when you put it on those terms, others are willing to do what you're asking. How often they're willing to do that when you aren't, again, accusing them of bad behavior or telling them what they think. So again, you don't love me, you don't listen to me, I asked you to take out the trash and you didn't do it. If you loved me, you would have taken out the trash. This is going to make others very defensive. I promise you, unless someone is really, really awake and done a lot of work on themselves, and even still, they may still get defensive because, again, we aren't being truthful, okay? We aren't really being honest or truthful. We are assuming a lot in those statements. So, much more honest is, again, when I ask you to take out the trash and you don't, I don't feel loved. So hopefully you can sense or feel the difference in those types of statements. If somebody came to you, somebody you love, and they said to you, you don't love me, and again, you know your own heart and mind, don't you? You know your own heart and mind. You know how you feel. It's very abrasive when someone else is trying to dictate how you feel, tell you they know how you feel, tell you that they somehow have the corner on the truth. Again, it really doesn't sit with us because it's ultimately not true. There's a part of us, you might say, as human beings that we often can sense. As much as we may want to deny, and we might deny the truth because of fear, there's a part of us that recognizes it and kind of knows it. So that statement, you don't love me, I asked you to take out the trash, you didn't take out the trash. You don't love me, you didn't call me back right away, whatever it might be. Or you're a bad friend, you didn't do this or that. Again, there's no definition somewhere in heaven written somewhere that says a good friend will always call you back right away. Someone that loves you will always take out the trash when you ask them. These are expectations that we have, that we created. These are ideas that our mind generated, and there really isn't any truth to it. Maybe someone told us this when we were a child. Maybe we want to believe that someone who loves us will always do what we ask or whatever it is. So we come in, again, we accuse, and then we, make this sort of statement. You don't love me because this and that. Well, again, the more truthful statement, when I ask you to take out the trash and you don't, I don't feel loved. It hurts me. Now, one thing I'll say here is that whether or not it's a good thing that we get hurt by these things, that is another discussion. That is a separate discussion. And that's where inquiry can be really helpful. All of you, I would encourage you want to be hurt by less and less things in the world. Please do not carry around your wounds and what you feel are your emotional needs. Don't carry them around like badges of honor. I understand as human beings we may have certain needs, we may have certain things that we feel are really important to us, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to feel guilty or ashamed about that. But some of us may have so many needs and so many triggers and so many things that set us off and upset us that even someone who loves us very much is not going to be able to manage keeping track of all of our triggers and all the things that upset us and all the things that make us feel unloved. So I will say here that in addition to emotional honesty, if you find you get upset a lot in situations, especially with people you love, because again, people we don't love, it's easy to let stuff go because we don't care. But when we love someone, we want to feel loved back. And when they do things, usually unintentionally, to make us feel unloved or triggered, very often that is something where, again, emotional honesty is called for, but we may also longer term need to look into why. Why is it that I need someone to take out the trash when I ask them to feel loved? Why is it that I need someone to call me right back? Why can't I know that somebody loves me, see the other evidence that they love me, and just accept that maybe they don't like the phone, maybe they don't call anyone back right away, maybe they hate taking out the trash because maybe that was something they were forced to do as a child, and now they feel like they're being put upon by being asked to take the trash out. So many things. The world is so vast and complex. Again, for us to break everything down just to our personal wants, needs, and desires is a big mistake. And most of us do it, especially before awakening and doing the work of embodiment. There's a tendency for us as human beings to put our own emotional needs and wants first without the emotional honesty. And so again, that's why this is a really important concept. So emotional honesty puts us more in line with truth. Again, if I say to you, when you do this, it makes me feel that. When you poke fun of me with your friends, it makes me feel embarrassed, and it upsets me. When you do this, it makes me feel this. There really is no arguing with that. Again, the statement is free of the you shouldn't or you should, right? Again, a non-emotionally honest way of stating more or less the same thing is you shouldn't make fun of me around your friends. It's embarrassing. I hope you can hear in the language how both of those statements are statements as though they're made like facts about things that are not factual, right? You shouldn't make fun of me around your friends. Where did we get that idea? Is it stated somewhere in some book, or did God come down and visible to everybody say people should not make fun of people around other people's friends? Where did we get this idea? It may be a good idea. It may even be true, but really there's no way of proving it or showing it. It's just we're sort of pulling it out of a hat. And I think if you were to poll different people, not everyone would agree by a long shot. There might be people who say, oh, I love it when we're bantering and poking fun and making fun of one another. That's the spice of life. I love that. I do that with all my friends. And so that's why I'm doing it with you, right? That I consider you a friend, and that's how I bond with my friends. We jest and make fun of one another. Now again, you may not enjoy that, and that's why emotional honesty, very good for setting boundaries, right? Saying, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. You're just sort of informing somebody. Again, you're taking off the you shouldn't or you should, this idea again of almost like commandments. People shouldn't do this. People should do that. We so often speak in this way, but really, who's to say? There tends to be good and bad in everything. So saying people should or shouldn't, we really don't find instances where we can apply this 100% across the board. Certainly we don't find that that's how things are in practice. We may all believe, but we find that reality is different. And like Byron Katie says, she's a lover of reality. That's really what enlightenment and embodiment is all about, falling in love with reality. What do we find in reality? We find that humans do different things. Humans do make fun of one another. Humans do all of these different things that we at one time or another say you should, you shouldn't. We'll always find exceptions. And if we're really awake and really honest, we'll often find exceptions in our own behavior. So as much as it may drive us crazy when someone else is doing it, we'll very, very often find we are actually guilty of the very thing that we are saying people shouldn't or people should do. So again, why do this? Why even bother practicing emotional honesty? Well, as I said earlier, you're coming closer to truth. You're also changing the way you're relating with others. And as I said, you may not think that they'll notice. I think that they will. I think you'll find that they're a lot more willing to give you what you want when you're emotionally honest. If you say, when we sleep in separate beds, it makes me feel alone, it makes me feel abandoned, it makes me feel like we're not a loving couple. Very often our partner might change their mind. Maybe they do prefer to sleep alone. But when they hear how it makes us feel, they very well may be willing to make a concession and change their mind. Again, if all things other being equal, they might still prefer to sleep alone. But if it means so much to us, then they may be willing to make a change, and they might actually find that they're happier in the end with that change, with things that way. But if we again come at them in an accusatory manner, and we say, you don't love me because you sleep in a different room, or you sleep in a different bed, or whatever it is, or again, we create these blanket statements that don't align with truth. They really overstate what we can ever know as a human being beyond a shadow of a doubt. When we do that, other people are going to be affected, I promise you. We're also not aligning with truth. And finally, we're going to feel the effects. Again, I know that you may not believe this, but you will likely, as with most practices, not know the effects until you actually start practicing it. So again, many of the practices that I share with you are things that you can do throughout the day as you relate with others. So emotional honesty, such a powerful practice, such a great way to transform your relationships and come closer to aligning your speech and your perspective with truth. We feel how we feel. Again, as I alluded to earlier, perhaps if we find ourselves upset a lot, if we find ourselves triggered all the time, if we find that we have all kinds of hoops for others that we're in a loving relationship with to jump through in order for us to feel loved, accepted, protected, then we may have some work that we need to do. But it still doesn't change the practice of emotional honesty, right? If I feel that I get triggered very easily in a certain situation, and perhaps in my meditation I introspect and I look at this and I decide, I don't think that's great. I think I have work to do. I think I need to work on this. I think I need to change my perspective. It doesn't mean that I can't be emotionally honest with my loved ones. I can easily say to them, look, I have this issue. I recognize it. when you say this or you do this, it makes me feel ashamed, it makes me feel guilty, it makes me feel unloved, it makes me feel alone, it makes me feel abandoned. We can state that and say, and I know that that's my issue ultimately, that's my problem, but I just want you to know that. Again, so beautiful and so powerful. And again, I'm speaking from experience, folks. You might be shocked at how much people who love you are willing to do, or at least to try, how much they're willing to try to change, to maybe better themselves or accommodate things that you may have, issues that you may have. We're all human. We all have our issues, our things, our triggers, our soft spots, our, again, things that we may want from those that we love. There's nothing wrong with that. And even if there is something ultimately that is the result of a psychological, emotional, or spiritual wound from the past that ultimately we want to heal, ultimately we want to heal it. In the short term, we might find that those who are in love with us, or those that love us, don't have a problem at all accommodating what we feel that we need to feel loved and accepted. So everyone, I hope that this is a practice that you will begin implementing right away, emotional honesty. It's something that you can share and teach to others. I would practice it first yourself. But as you enter into discussions with those that you love, again, usually this is around things where there's tension, disagreement, right? If everyone's in agreement and everyone's loving, hugging, kissing, then usually there's nothing to discuss, right? We don't need emotional honesty. But it's when maybe a boundary has been crossed, when we are feeling unloved or unwanted, when our emotional needs, we don't feel like they're being met. That's where we can really be emotionally honest and open and say, this is what I feel I need. Again, when you do this, I feel this way. Or when you don't do this, this is how I feel. And I want to feel different. And again, if you're really awake, you do want to acknowledge that maybe there's growth for you to do or changes for you to do. And again, the place I would love to get all of you ultimately is a place that may sound fantastical, may not sound possible to you. That's okay. But ultimately, we want to get to a place where we're just enjoying this life and this world. We don't have a lot of needs that need to be met by others. We find that without asking, others are already giving so much of themselves. It may not be our personal preference, but we sort of fall in love with others as they are and where they are. Doesn't mean we want to spend our lives living with anyone in particular. And we may not even really care to spend time with certain individuals, but in a sense, we learn to love them anyway, right where they are. So sometimes this is expressed as you don't need to like everybody, but you need to love everybody. Not just everybody, but everything, every situation you might find yourself in. We really want to love this life and love the world. So, in a sense, over time, we find ourselves with less and less triggers, less and less of a list, a to-do list, you might say, of those who love us, what they need to do for us to feel loved, to feel accepted. Because ultimately, those are things we want to cultivate and find within ourselves. And my experience is you can do that. And the irony, the interesting thing is, the more that we find it within ourselves, not only do we need it less from others, but we find others are more willing to give it to us. And the reason for this is they sense that we don't need it. And they sense that we're accepting of them because, again, if you feel you need certain things from somebody else in order to be happy, in order to have peace, in order to feel loved, to experience joy, then your relationship is a type of negotiation, especially when you don't feel that you are getting those things, when you aren't getting those needs met. Now again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty for having needs or feeling like you need certain things in a relationship. Another thing we want to be honest about is where we are in our development, you might say, or where we are with things. So if I feel like I need someone to take out the trash when I ask, and I don't feel loved when they don't, I want to be really honest about that is how I feel currently. Whether I should or shouldn't feel that way is a different question. But it is how I feel right now. So acknowledging that, being honest about that, being honest about, okay, this is what I need in a relationship. I need someone to take out the trash when I tell them, because that makes me feel loved, and it's very important to me to feel loved in a relationship. Again, this is emotional honesty at its best. So I would love to hear from you. Is this something that you've heard of before? Is it something that maybe you've actually practiced before? I would also love to hear your experience with it if it's not, or if it is. If you've tried this before, let me know what your experience was like. If you haven't, try it. Try it today. Try it next week. Try it on for a while. See if you're able to keep that emotional honesty going, where you aren't accusing others or making statements about how people should or shouldn't behave. You're rather just stating how their behavior makes you feel. And again, you're taking responsibility for how you feel, right? Again, if someone were able to make someone else feel guilty, then they could make everybody feel guilty. But it takes two to tango. So I have a certain makeup, I have a certain predisposition, and the other person is able to sort of trigger that predisposition, and then I feel guilty. So again, it takes two to tango. No one can make us feel guilty on their own. We have to have that, again, predisposition for it. And this is true also of positive emotions. And this is very, very important for us to understand. No one else can make us feel loved. No one else can bring us peace or joy. This isn't to say they can't play a part. This isn't to say that a teacher can't point toward joy and peace, but ultimately it's within us. And this is what a good teacher will do, is she will try and point you back to yourself, to your own mind and heart and true nature, and help you realize the truth of your true nature and your makeup as a human being, and hopefully allow you to access your birthright of peace and joy, love and happiness, an unlimited amount of each, truly. And when we do that, life truly is a miracle, a blessing, and we feel that from within. It isn't something that we need to practice anymore. It just comes from within us every moment, just the gratitude at being alive. All right, everyone, so thanks again for listening, especially if you're here at the end. Please do check out the Patreon page. I post a lot of stuff on there, including events and talks by other creators that I think are relevant to the topics we cover here on this channel. And I also have classes on there. All of it is free, but it does give you an opportunity to contribute and support the work that I do if you care to. And if you do, I do appreciate that very much. So until next time, everyone, namaste and have a beautiful, beautiful day.